share that with other folks. But all right. Happy New Year, one and all. Happy 2023. Welcome to Montana Renewable Energy Association's legislative briefing at the Trailhead of the Montana Legislature. We're in the first week of the 68th legislative session, where lawmakers from across the state come together to set policy for the function of Montana. We're really glad you can join us. Things are buzzing here in Helena. I think, just briefly to introduce myself, Susan already did, though. McKenna Sellers, Executive Director for Montana Renewable Energy Association, and I also serve as our primary lobbyist during the session. So in this briefing, we'll talk about why the legislature is important for advancing renewables. We'll go over MREA's clean energy priorities. We'll leave some time for a question and answer, and then we'll also provide some insights for how MREA members can engage, and members and renewable energy supporters alike all across Montana. Of course, we'd love to have folks become members of MREA if you're not already. But we want to provide insights on how members and supporters can navigate and weigh into Montana's sometimes kind of complicated lawmaking process. So first, a little introduction to who we are. MREA has been around since 2001. We were founded on the premise of advancing renewable energy in the state of Montana through education, advocacy, and industry engagement. We have members from all walks of life, I like to say, across the state, from students who are interested in pursuing renewables as a profession. We have business owners, distributed generation, and like solar installers from across the state. We have nonprofits who are part of the organization. We have cities and advocates. And so overall, it's just it's an exciting and diverse group that's interested in advancing renewables in Montana. Oh, and I guess I should take a one step back and make the membership pitch. If you're not already a member of MREA, I encourage you to do that. The more voices that we have in this organization equals or equates to the stronger that the organization can be and the stronger that our voice will be. So if you're joining us for the first time, or even if you know folks who should be members of MREA, I really encourage you to invite them to be a part of the process, invite them to come to the trainings like this, or invite them to join through the chat that I just put in the link that I put to the chat. There we go. So let's start with our basics, our 101 ground level. What is the legislature? We hear about it in the news. What is it really? The legislature is a governing body made up of elected officials. Those are legislators from districts that cover all 56 counties within Montana's borders. The legislature is a bicameral body, meaning that there is a House and a Senate. The House is made up of 100 legislators and the Senate is made up of 50 legislators. These folks are elected officials, meaning that Montana voters have put their vote of confidence, so to speak, into these legislators to set policy for the state of Montana. The legislature meets for 90 days during the odd numbered years. So right now we're in day 3 of the 2023 legislative session. There was a 90-day legislative session in 2021, and it goes on and on. The one constitutional charge given to legislators during the legislative session is to pass a balanced budget. But beyond that, of course, the function of the legislature is to consider laws and design, vet, and create policy that with the primary function of like helping and supporting the people of Montana. And that's really broad. You know, we go from road use to grocery store regulation to general like health and wellness policies, how much money we're putting into our state agencies. So there's just a whole lot that goes into the policy setting and the policy creation that happens during the legislature. And of course, in the context of MREA, what we care about is renewable energy policy, energy efficiency, and the funding that goes into the government agencies that support that mission. Who are these people? Who is the legislature? I just told you there's 150 folks in the mix. Montana is unique, and there's a few other states like this. We have a citizen legislature, meaning that the folks that we elect to our legislature are, they have careers outside of being career politicians, so to speak. So the legislature becomes their full-time job for 90 days, but when they go back home, they're farmers, ranchers, business owners, consultants, scientists, teachers. I mean, the list goes on, which I think is really powerful that Montana has a citizen legislature, but it also means that they have a lot of learning to do when they're new, and we have tons of seasoned legislators as well. So part of what Montana Renewable Energy Association does is build relationships with those legislators. And I'm really happy and proud to know so many amazing, smart people that work up in the Capitol. Based on your address or even your business address, you have a senator and a representative that represent you. So as an individual, as McKenna Sellers, I know that I have 2 representatives that are supposed to represent my interests as a voter and as a citizen of Montana. The legislative website that the Leg Services for the state provides is a really helpful tool that I would recommend when we get deeper into how to engage in the legislative process. But you can look up who your legislators are using this legislator lookup link. So you can put down your address and it'll pull up a map saying, here's your House district and who represents you right now, and then your Senate district and who represents you in that context. I always recommend engaging with that person directly because they're the one who's supposed to be accountable to you and your voice. Not to say that the whole body doesn't represent you, because they do. They're elected officials and should be held accountable by citizens. But that's especially so for the person that you and your district voted for and put into office. Why does the legislature and why does the legislative session matter to MREA? In the context of MREA, we remember that our mission is advancing renewable energy and really integrating renewable energy into our economy, making it a part of Montanans' lives. That covers students.
Well, Bandit was running towards it.
Oh, he wasn't running away from his cave?
Yeah, he was.
So like I said earlier about MREA's membership, we have students, households, business members, cities, and all the folks within Montana who value and see the need for a clean energy transition. And that translates to a better environment for our communities, provides lasting careers, and saves a lot of folks money. Renewable energy is strongly driven by, let me back up. The renewable energy industry is a very much policy-driven environment, meaning that the laws that our legislators create have lasting effects and really ripple effects on the renewable energy efficiency industry in terms of customer adoption, the job market, safety and training requirements. There's so much that happens in the legislator and in the legislative session and the policies that they create, which is one of the reasons that MREA and our members show up to advocate for common sense, common ground, clean energy policies that make sense for Montana. Renewable energy is more mainstream than ever before. According to the most recent National Solar Jobs Census, jobs in the solar industry have increased by 18% in Montana alone between 2020 and 2021. That's huge. And that's a job market that for MREA, of course, we want to maintain the health of that industry. And so policy plays a huge role in making that happen and creating that landscape for the good and sustainability of that industry. Since 2011, solar energy has grown dramatically in terms of jobs and electricity generation capacity. Installation costs have gone down and supportive policies nationwide have driven growth. So the role of MREA is not only to protect existing clean energy and energy efficiency policy at the state level, but also promote supportive policies that drive our growth. Over the last decade, solar employment has more than doubled nationwide. For us, we see 20% in 1 year is really significant. Maintaining a fair policy landscape for renewables is directly correlated to the health, success, and growth of the industry. That's the bottom line why MREA is committed to engaging with lawmakers and defending policies that work for our communities. And so while the session has just started, there's not a whole lot of meat and potatoes, so to speak, bills that are ready for prime time that MREA might have an interest in. However, as the session goes on, things get much, much busier. And one of the things that MREA provides is our legislative action alerts and our newsletter, where we'll give you all as members up to date and direct information on how to engage in the legislative process and what we're seeing up here in Helena. If you're not on our mailing list, I'm putting that in the chat, and I encourage you to share that around and definitely get on our mailing list so that you can engage when things come up. Okay, let's dig a little deeper into our priorities. These are the priorities that were passed by our MREA policy committee. Members of our board and interested folks who are part of that committee that I think a few of them are actually on this call. So I might even ask them how they're feeling about the session and what they think are our biggest priorities and what's up next. But our biggest priority is defending net metering in Montana, the crediting system that we have for distributed generation individuals to receive a credit back on their bill for the energy that they produce. As of August 2021, 39 states required utilities to offer net metering for solar, and Montana is one of them. The health of our net metering regulations also directly correlates to the investment and return for distributed solar, and we want to make sure that we're defending the industry's growth and the trajectory that we've seen. Beyond net metering, we also want to defend existing energy efficiency policies and innovative things that the state already has in place. One of those is commercial property assessed clean energy, which is an energy efficiency financing tool for businesses to get upgrades and energy efficiency upgrades on their business with an incremental payback through a line item on their property tax bill. So it's an innovative program. It just got passed last session and it's already seen some great success. So Montana Renewable Energy Association would be defending policies like that this session. Let's see. Other things that MREA has our eyes on are utility regulation and resource planning for the next years. We are seeing some bills coming through that would create some extra governmental bodies related to resource planning and acquisition for the state of Montana. And for us, we know that the renewable transition is inevitable. We want to advocate for more wind, solar, and battery storage, pumped hydro, and more creative ways for our state to move forward and meet our energy needs when we know that we have more folks moving into the state and the demand continues to increase. So if we can manage with energy efficiency, demand side management, and the renewable transition, those are things that are important to us. So MREA will certainly have our eyes on the bills establishing some resource planning entities. We're also interested in some of the electric vehicle related bills, recognizing that the renewable energy transition also includes our movement away from fossil fuels. And for lots of folks, that means getting electric vehicles and pairing that with maybe solar on their roofs. So making sure that the fees and regulations around electric vehicles are fair and reasonable is a big deal for MREA as well. We'll always be tracking on interconnection standards. We'd love to advance policies around energy storage and codes that make sense as well. But overall, that's our general broad brush priority list. And curious, Nicola or others on this call from the policy committee, if you have more to say on that. Sorry to put you on the spot.
That's okay. I think we were just talking about this morning, and one of the things we're discussing are how other folks are also interested in net metering, and instead of just always being like fighting people that were trying to kill it, it's almost like the net metering IQ in the state has risen, and other people are bringing bills that to the table that we just want to make sure we're part of the conversation and trying to steer it in a way that works for us, and sort of buckling up for a net metering conversation that's a little closer to reality, a little closer to a solution that could work for everyone versus just us in the past trying to fight sort of ridiculous bills that were just trying to kill it. So that's something we're preparing for.
Absolutely. Yeah, thanks, Nicola. And I think you're right on the money that the way that net metering policy is shaped at the legislature and then enacted through the Public Service Commission is at the top of our pyramid of priorities for MREA. And when there are bills of importance where we really need to rally, contact our legislators, write letters to the editor, and make it known what's happening in the Capitol, we'll be sure to communicate that through our mailing list and through some regular legislative updates.
And I'd like to add that with Walt Sells being new heading up the Energy Committee, there's a nice opportunity for McKenna and MREA to help educate him and perhaps other new members on the multiple benefits of renewable energy.
Definitely. Educating committee members and educating legislators from your lived experience or from your business perspective, wherever you're coming from, is really key. I mean, it can make or break. I know that people ask all the time, do legislators really listen to their constituents? And the answer is 100% yes. Personal stories and lived experience on how a bill will impact you and your life or your business makes the difference and can change votes. And I've seen it happen firsthand.
Can you hear me? Did I just hear you say that Walt Sales is on the Energy Committee?
He is. Is that your district?
Yes.
Well, that'll
didn't
be very
realize that.
relevant. Yes.
Yes.
He is the chair of Senate Energy this year, so he's playing a really important role.
Do you have any, like, I wrote him over 100 emails last year or last session regarding different bills, and I never once heard back from him. And when I tried calling his number, it goes to a voicemail, but it's his wife. It's at their house.
Oh, interesting.
So someday when you guys have the time, if you can let us know a better way. I mean, I've called the Capitol. I know that works, but I just feel like everyone says he's such a great guy and such a good senator, but he's totally out of touch as far as I'm concerned, as far as he's treated me anyway.
Yeah, well,
Sorry to
also,
interrupt that.
well, I want to give you some applause for 100 emails last session because that's really impressive. And do you pronounce your name Sass?
Yes.
Okay. Hey, Sass. Thanks for being on the call. I think that an all of the above strategy is always smart as we go a little deeper here into Have Your Say Montana that gives you the tools for calling the Capitol about a bill you want to take a position on, writing your legislator directly, calling or contacting your legislator. It sounds like your experience that sales has been a little harder to reach. That might be a case for making a citizen lobby day trip to Helena and establishing a name to face connection where he'll remember you in future sessions too. Of course, that's a lot of work, but it's another strategy to put in your toolkit. Definitely.
Yeah, I meant to during the off season or whatever call it to just call him and introduce myself and stuff so that I was in his radar, but I neglected to do that. So yeah, that's a good idea what you suggested. I'll maybe do that. Maybe.
Yeah, and now's a great time with week 1. This is when legislators are just getting started.
And I think it's powerful as an individual to speak up when you have something you want to say. But to me, too, that's another reason why membership in MREA is so powerful, because when you're part of a group, that's very powerful as well.
You mean to mention that? Like for me, when I'm contacting him to say I'm part of this MREA or something? Or you mean your MREA as a whole is more powerful because it's a group?
Yeah, I mean, the more members we have, they're supportive of a certain direction of policy that benefits renewable energy. Yeah, or just signing on, if we've got something, or showing up to speak up as part of an MREA group.
I see. Okay. Okay.
There are other questions about MREA's priorities or what we are seeing so far, recognizing that we're 3 days into session, so there aren't a lot of details we can provide quite yet.
Well, are the committees, so the committees are already known then?
Yes.
Who's on the committees? Okay.
Yep, and in this In the slides coming up, I'm going to talk about the function of lawmaking and how bills become law, and then pairing that also with the different engagement strategies, how to look up your legislators and how to see who those committees are, knowing that MREA spends a whole lot of time in House FRET, Federal Relations, Energy and Telecommunications, and then a lot of time in Senate Energy in the other chamber. Okay. See a question here from Gary. What's the status on community renewable energy projects?
Right, we put a 320 there.
What's the status of community renewable energy projects in Montana? Thanks for that question, Gary. So as of right now, the CREP section of state statute was repealed last session. And so there are some potential policies in the works to maybe introduce some proactive bills around like a community solar model where subscribers could buy into community solar, not quite the exact equivalent of what you're talking about with CREPs and community renewable energy projects, but there are some proactive bills in the works that, as capacity allows, MREA will probably weigh in and support. Okay, let's go a little into the function, our Schoolhouse Rock version of how a bill becomes law. So I think that this graphic is really helpful and can kind of give us the basics. We know that legislators are creating policy. They do that in the form of introducing bills. Sometimes they're funding bills, sometimes they're policy setting bills, and often they are both. So bills are introduced by sponsors. Those are legislators. Those are our elected officials. You can have more than one sponsor. There's lots of co-sponsors that can sign on to a bill, or they have the opportunity to do that. And legislators have the same mentality as we do. If we're bringing something proactive, which in this case, MREA is not bringing a specific bill to the 2023 legislature. Instead, we're focusing much more on defending net metering policies. But legislators want to see their bills passed too. So they're garnering support. They're trying to find co-sponsors. And the way that that moves depends on if it's introduced in the Senate or in the House. So if the person that's starting the bill is a senator or a representative, so they will design the bill, they'll go through and work through the stakeholder process, make sure that the bill is designed how they want it to, and then they introduce it to a committee. And as you can tell on this process, there's so many steps that it takes before a bill becomes law, and that is absolutely by design. Our government and our democracy is supposed to work that we can't just make wild changes without going through a pretty heavy vetting process. And that vetting process is going through and debating in committees, passing through a chamber, moving to the other chamber, and then debate in that in the equivalent committee on the other side. And then eventually, if it makes it, pass both chambers and then heads to the governor's desk. So throughout that process of a bill becoming law, all of those little boxes or steps in the process also mean opportunities for the public or for interest groups like MREA to engage. So committee hearings is one place where MREA puts a lot of focus when there are bills of interest. We go in and testify, and we've had specific lobby days too, where our members or our business installers will come and weigh in on a bill that's going to impact renewable energy in Montana. Oops. No, go back. Oh, shoot. Sorry, everybody. Reverse. I think this image is really helpful for the basics. Of course, the process can sometimes get a little more complicated than that, especially if there's a bill that's introduced in the House, but there are some amendments and it doesn't look the same by the time it gets to the Senate. But generally, this is the flow of a bill, which also provides lots of opportunities for groups like MREA to weigh in and make sure the public knows what's going on. Another place I'd like to draw your attention is the Montana Legislative Services Division web portal called Have Your Say Montana. And if you haven't heard of this, I think that it's a really helpful tool that's meant for use for the public, but also meant for MREA members or anyone really. In the Have Your Say Montana portal, which I'm going to drop in the chat, there are tools for how to call legislative services and put your name down in support or opposition to a bill can take as little as 3 to 4 minutes sometimes. So if MREA puts out an email, we'll make sure to accompany that with tools for how to email your legislator, how to call the Legislative Services Desk. But the Have Your Say Montana site is a nice tool for you to refer to and decide how you'd like to engage. There are so many opportunities. Then another thing that happened this week or was confirmed this week is virtual participation in legislative hearings. I think that's a huge access tool that's really beneficial for democracy at large, but certainly beneficial for MREA members as well. If you have, I think you have to have at least 24 hours notice. I would be safe and say 48 hours. You can register to testify on a bill virtually. And then you can show up to the hearing virtually, like on a Zoom meeting, rather than driving to Helena and attending in person. As far as where there is greater impact, I still think that in-person packs a bigger punch than Zoom or virtual attending, but recognizing that people driving long miles is sometimes unattainable, the virtual option is still around, and that's been continued on through 2023, which I think is of great value. As far as submitting testimony or public comments in support or opposition of bills, the typical request is that be submitted 24 hours in advance of a hearing so that the Legislative Services Secretaries actually print out a packet for the committee members and then provide those public comments to each committee member for their review. So that's a little about Have Your Say Montana. Let's see. How do you register for testimony by Zoom? That Have Your Say Montana portal, Patty, that's how you can sign up. I think they have another link within that Have Your Say Montana page. The tricky part is that public comment opportunities and hearings come up pretty quickly. Sometimes we only have a few days notice. So that's where MREA is going to continue to put out our legislative briefings and updates so people know when hearings are around and when we really want folks to testify or put in some comments. Then the last reminder I just have to say is that the Montana energy advocacy scene, especially the clean energy and efficiency scene, we've got a lot of great people on our team. Folks like Montana Environmental Information Center, Northwest Energy Coalition, Renewable Northwest, and Northern Plains are all additional like advocacy and organizations across Montana who also weigh in on clean energy policy. So when the going gets tough, the tough get going is definitely the sentiment that I want to articulate to you all when I think about these amazing groups and allies that we as MREA have the pleasure of working with. And so we'll definitely be engaging with these groups as net metering defense bills come up and there's other priorities that happen during this session. I just think it's encouraging to know that we're not an island out here by any means. There are a lot of incredible groups across the state with the same motivations for a clean energy transition. So we'll be showing up. We'll be showing up 100%, 110%, and then some. Well, that concludes the presentation here with the basics and our legislative briefing. I hope that, let's see, am I still sharing? No, not anymore. I'll put my thank you note up there just so you have my email and you might be able to contact me. But I appreciate you all taking the time to join us today, and I hope that this information was useful. I can just speak a little anecdotally about the experience we've had the past couple of days. I think that the key notes that I want to articulate to you all as members of MREA as far as like what we're seeing in the Capitol is what Nicola voiced, that there are some proposals out there to change net metering, and MREA is going to keep a really watchful eye on defending policies that we think are fair and fair for the industry, and make sure they're not designed to kill the industry, which we've seen in sessions past, and we have to do the call to arms from year to year. But I think this will be one of those years again, just as a general predictor without having a crystal ball. And then I guess the rest of the interest in energy relates to Northwestern Energy pre-approval process. So that's where an investor-owned utility could go to the Public Service Commission and request a guaranteed rate of return for generation. That law was thrown out between last session and this one in 2023, but I think there is some interest in doing some modifications there and potentially bringing that back in a way that could go back into state statute. That's more of a consumer related bill, and I don't think that's something that MREA will directly weigh in on, but we'll certainly be tracking it. So between net metering, some redesign around the Public Service Commission districting is another bill that we've seen. And then one of the most egregious bills I've seen so far is a bill that would tax large scale renewables of 25 megawatts or larger at about 25% of their revenue, which is just totally outrageous. I'm not aware of another business or entity that's taxed at 25 to 60%. And it shows kind of like a cherry picking from that particular bill sponsor about what kind of energy generation they think is valuable or not valuable. So, I mean, that's one where I think we'll definitely be weighing in and opposing something that taxes renewables to the point that it would be a huge detriment to the industry and a huge detriment to deployment. And so those are what we know so far on paper. Yeah. Any questions from the group? Question from Elizabeth here. Is there any chance for state rebates and incentives for solar panels, heat pumps, electric vehicles? Let's see. Elizabeth, do you want to speak more to that? Okay, I guess it's a pretty direct question. So far, we have not seen bill requests to that effect. There's some interest in energy efficiency standards. That's not exactly the same as like an incentive, but there is some proactive policy out there. I would direct us more so to the rebates and incentives coming from the federal level at this point. I don't see a path in which rebates and incentives would pass in this session, just giving the political dynamics at the state level.
And just know the IRA rebates as well as tax credits will be through the DEQ, and they said they'll have that on their website, and it's possible we'll have a webinar once they know what they're going to do and how that'll work. So keep an eye on that. But for heat pumps, know that there is a current Northwestern Energy rebate at $125 per ton. That's 12,000 BTU. And then there's some other efficiency rebates, whether it's new construction or existing construction. And I did receive that rebate for my heat pump. So make sure to take a look at that. And there are also rebates from the utility for commercial sector, not just residential.
Yeah, thank you, Susan. That's an excellent point. Just because the legislature might not be passing a state incentives doesn't mean we don't have other incentives out there. Other questions?
Somebody had a question about sustainability or something. I didn't quite catch it.
That was probably me, Susan. I just wondered, it looked like we might have some city or county sustainability coordinators online here. And I'm just wondering what they're looking out for, what they're worried about, or what they're hoping passes.
I guess I'll jump in. I'm Natalie Meyer with the City of Bozeman in sustainability, and I'm tracking quite a few bills and trying to prioritize. One thing that is on my radar right now is a companion bill. It's related to EVs, and it's a companion bill to House Bill 60, which there's a hearing this Friday, and that bill would increase or provide a premium registration fee for EVs. But I'm more concerned about the companion bill. It's LC 0506, and that puts a 3 cent per kilowatt premium on, well, tax on EV charging stations. And I'm especially concerned about the impact that would have on level 2 charging and multifamily housing operations, where just the logistics of collecting such a tax would be very problematic. And it's really seems like double taxation. And there is some provision for getting a tax credit back, but no consumer is realistically going to be able to track their payments throughout a year. So I'm working on that one and hope we can at least eliminate the latter of the two.
And Natalie, isn't that tax what also would be on DC fast charging? And as we know, we cannot have disincentives. That infrastructure is critical for the adoption of electric vehicles.
Correct.
Hi, everybody. I guess I'll chime in really quickly. Since Mark also called me out, it's well, I'll take a personal moment and just say it's great to see all of your faces again in a different capacity here. Yeah, so Andrew Valenis, I'm the Climate Action Program Coordinator with Missoula County. And I think McKenna and Natalie certainly covered pretty much all the ones that we're tracking right now, just to give a sense of what we might be up against this session. The only one I would add to the list that I'm currently tracking is a bill that would simply repeal the state energy policy altogether. You know, that's the kind of things that we get to deal with. So, you know, it's a lot of trying to strike things down, stack the deck, and we'll be working hard to avoid that. But hopefully there are some good bills that we can get behind to support about energy conservation and renewable energy development. But I agree with McKenna's assessment that it seems like we're going to be playing a lot of defense per usual. So we'll look forward to doing that. And I'm glad to see you all here supporting MREA. They're an incredibly important voice up there, and McKenna does incredible work at the legislature, which we've seen before. So fully confident in her ability to represent the organization well up there.
Well, thanks, Andrew and Natalie. That's really wonderful. And thank you for graciously coming into this space and without us telling you that we might ask you to come on the spot. But thank you for sharing your insights. And that's sort of the nature of MREA also, is that because we have this incredible and amazing network, it's great that we have all these different voices that can weigh in and share your technical knowledge and political read and policy expertise. So thank you.
Just real quick, Andrew, what's the bill where they're trying to do away with the energy program, or what is that again? Could you share that?
It's
I know
House Bill 170.
Yep, and that's a Steve Gunderson bill that doesn't have a hearing scheduled yet, unless it got scheduled this morning, which could have. Any other questions about what's ahead? Okay. Well, with that, then I will close by saying, while we have our work cut out for us as we defend the renewable energy landscape in Montana, it's a pleasure to be able to do that alongside all of you, knowing that we have so many entities that are working toward this common goal, and our common mission is encouraging, to say the least. So thank you all for taking the time to be on this call. And like we said at the very beginning of the call too, the more voices that we have as a part of Montana Renewable Energy Association, the stronger that voice is. So if you have friends, colleagues, maybe neighbors who put solar on their roof this year who don't know much about MREA, I strongly encourage you to get them on the mailing list, get them engaged in the legislative process, and see if they'll join MREA as well. So lots of good stuff. I put our mailing list, or our mailing sign up list, at the end of this chat, or in the chat currently. And then I'll also put the link to join MREA right there. Okay. Well, Well, I hope everyone has a wonderful afternoon. Again, thanks for being part of our legislative briefing. In terms of what's ahead for the coming months, we'll have a legislative recap at the end of the session that MREA is going to host. And then beyond that, we'll be doing our usual action alerts throughout the session. So keep a lookout for those things. And thanks for being a part of the organization. Thanks, everybody. Have a good afternoon.